Are we go time? Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get started in just one moment. We'll leave the door open in case any additional speakers or attendees want to come in. But welcome everyone to our event this afternoon. Let's get started at our flagship Building to COP27 event, which I will show you the title of. Here we go, Climate Resilience in the Built Environment, Adapting to a Changing Climate.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, all for being here today. This event is brought to you by two core partners of Building to COP Coalition, the World Green Building Council, and Resilience Rising. I am Amira Ayoub. I am the head of MENA programs at World Green Building Council, and I am delighted to be one of your hosts today.
Thanks, Amira. And my name is Katrina Brady. I'm the Director of Strategy and Development at World GBC, and I also have the pleasure of being Amira's co-host. So we have a full agenda for our 3-hour thematic session today. So thank you for joining us. We will keep this as interactive and engaging as possible. But the theme for today in the Buildings Pavilion here on the ground in Sharm el-Sheikh is resilience. So us talking about resilience and adaptation and the role that the built environment must play in facilitating that really could not be more relevant to where we are right now.
And because we are keeping the agenda fast-paced, there are many critical angles to cover around resilience and adaptation in the built environment. We will be hosting a range of panels covering the key principles of resilience and adaptation, how to catalyze finance for resilience and adaptation, the role of civic society for resilience and adaptation, and the focus on disaster-hit areas. And we will discuss the sustainable reconstruction and recovery framework. And finally, we will showcase case studies from around the world.
Absolutely. So stay with us for as much as you can, but we will begin with hearing from some esteemed speakers for our opening remarks. We currently have 1 out of 2, so fingers crossed our second one arrives, but it is my pleasure to hand over to Christina Gamboa, the CEO of the World Green Building Council.
Thank you, Amira. Thank you, Katrina. Hello, everyone. Could you close that door? Maybe it helps for us humans in this place. Amazing. Better? A little bit. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So my message, my task here from the team in this introduction is to keep it simple in a topic that you're going to see is not that much, but that we're doing our best efforts across many stakeholders to support more action and delivery of resilient solutions. So the message is this. At this present moment, and in order to mitigate against climate change, we must be incorporating resilience and adaptation strategies to combat the challenges because they're inevitable now. So we just have to grab ourselves stronger to where we are and do much more with less, if you like. The impacts of climate change are already being felt in all geographies around the world. And yes, they will be more extreme and more frequent. There's no putting, my mom would say, you can't quote that one, yeah? So, and we're gonna be grappling in this transition, right, to a net zero future, but in the middle of that, we already have historic emissions continuing to bake on our backs. So we have no forces that are around us, and we have to navigate that landscape. However, the message is that climate resilience for the built environment means that we are empowered to work through solutions for our communities and deliver quality infrastructure that, of course, will help us cope with those hazards, those stress points. The stats are around this place, which thank you so much also in particular for Global ABC for the leadership in the Buildings Pavilion. You see here that 4.4 billion people are already impacted one way or another by climate change. and it's claiming lives, and it is costing us losses. And the majority of the cities and people that are in that front line are not prepared for these challenges. So the extreme weather events in cities, those warning signals, mean that we need to come together to build new solutions for the challenges that we're facing, and putting, let's say, people in the heart of our efforts, right? And making sure that the opportunity to deliver on this agenda can really advance. So we recently launched a guide with the high-level climate champions in C40 cities on resilience and the built environment. And what it means is really that there are solutions out there that are viable, logical, make business sense, and of course are imperative from the right thing to do. There's no excuse really to not deliver better solutions right now, because we can, through collaboration, make sure communities thrive in spite of shocks. So Amira mentioned the framework for sustainable reconstruction guidelines. We did that with the support of EBRD and UN Habitat, and I think those guidelines are also relevant to the conversation around resilience, and you'll see it throughout the session. Because ultimately it's about scaling those solutions at society, policy, economic, cultural level that can enable that action we need in a moment of adapting and change. We know cities and governments are enablers and front runners of solutions, and so we'll see also today in this session how their leadership is so much needed and welcomed to secure that resilient future that has circular practices and people at the heart. So that's my intro, and very high level intro. The experts are here to go deeper and explain what collectively we mean. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Christina. You have teed us off beautifully. Okay, unfortunately. Here we have, just in time to make his opening remarks. Thank you very much, everyone. Please welcome Mayor Manuel do Araújo, the mayor of Quelimane in Mozambique. Would you like a few minutes to get comfortable, or would you? Yes, that is quite okay. Okay, so we now hand over to Mayor Manuel do Araújo for some opening remarks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and really sorry for coming on time, if I should say. I'm coming from a very peculiar city, which is the city of Quelimane. I'm the mayor of that city. Some call it an intermediate city, and we are about 400,000 inhabitants. It's the fourth largest city in Mozambique. It's a coastal city, and we face several challenges down there because the city geographically is on an estuary, the hand of the Bonj Sinai River, which makes it one of the most vulnerable cities, not only in Mozambique, but also in the African continent and in the world. It's under sea level, which, as I said, brings a lot of challenges. I feel very honored to be invited to be here today to make a few comments, and I think that during the discussion we will be able of sharing some insights of what we've been doing in this challenge to address climate change. Because of its geographical location, we suffer double floodings, be it from the sea level rise, but also from the rainfall, which put us in a very uncomfortable position. But also, we see it as an opportunity to raise awareness among the citizens of our city, and we use to combat the vulnerability the city faces. We use both nature-based solutions, but also conventional solutions. And we've been championing several innovative projects, which I think that during this debate we'll be able of addressing, and I hope that I'm not going to push too much, just wanted to greet you and open this discussion and see how we can make partnerships, but also to advance the cause and make sure that the voice of the Global South is heard. This COP is being now named as the COP for implementation. And we hope that by exchanging view and experience, we'll be able of addressing the causes of the Global South, not only as the Global South, but in partnership with our partner cities, research institutions, and other global institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, and other institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we will have the pleasure of hearing from Mayor Manuel later on in the session. Thank you. Do you need any assistance? Thank you. Okay, slight geographic relocation, but it is now time for us to welcome our first panel up on stage. Go over here. So let me please invite our 4 panelists with whom we will be discussing the key principles of resilience and adaptation in the built environment. Please can I welcome Karim Selwan, the CEO and founder of Resilience, who is also the co-chair of the Adaptation Working Group of Global ABC, Dr. Sunita Purushottam, the head of sustainability at Mahindra Lifespace Developers, Helen Wanjohi, the Resilience African Cities lead for WRI, and Ana Carolina Lafemina, the deputy head of the City of Sao Paulo's districts. Please join us up here. Thank you very, very much for being with us today. I'm sitting on the second microphone. That does not help. Okay. So we have 30 minutes for this panel. So we are going to be quick fire. We're going to have a fantastic conversation. And the plan is by the end, in 29 minutes time, this group are going to be very comfortable with the concept of resilience and adaptation. So an introductory statement from you all, please. What does an adaptive and climate resilient built environment look like to you? And how are you implementing it through your work? Helen, let's start with you.
I think I'm happy to be fast because I'm the Resilient Africa Cities lead at WRI. So I think my perspectives will be from an African lens. And really quickly, we are in the most rapidly, fastest urbanizing continent in the world. Our cities are the most youthful, with over 60% being over 30, right? We have contributed the least in terms of emissions. And so there's that climate justice discussion here. So for me, and our cities are also predominantly informal. So for me, an adaptive and resilient city is the one where we have left no one behind. We are moving together with everyone. So where the built environment in itself is not just one that's low carbon, resilient, but also serves to protect the people who are most vulnerable to climate shocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So cities have a strong role to play in climate resilience, and they need to be planned in such a way that it protects the citizens from climate impact. So in short, resilient cities are well planned and very well prepared. So that is a resilient city. In the work that we do at Mahindra Life Spaces, there are 2 elements that we look at. One is looking at climate responsive design so that we can combat excessive heat and temperature rise, preparing for that. And the other is the water risk or the flood risk, which looks at how we plan the developments at the land acquisition stage. So that's how we are looking at implementing resilience into the projects that we are currently developing in India.
Thank you. From my side, we speak about with the Global ABC and notably with my co-chair Judith here about what we mean about the climate change adaptation. We think that the adaptation is not a one answer; it's a processes. It's a processes in making progress, because we need each time to be aligned, to be adapted with a new context, with new knowledge concerning the context of the climate change, because the climate change is absolutely in continuous changing. And the question is, if your decision today could be relevant, it could be updated, it could be also aligned with the future uncertainty climate change. That's why we try to promote, but I will see after for the perhaps the second question, the 10 principles for effective action, but we'll discuss after.
Come back to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Catriona, for the opportunity, for the invitation. And on behalf of our mayor, Ricardo Nunes, it's an honor to our city, the city of São Paulo, to be here. So in São Paulo, we are more than 12 million inhabitants, almost 12.5 billion. If we count the metropolitan region, we are more than 22 million. So we are huge, and our efforts is to make our city more resilient. So many people say our city is gray, but we have 30% of our territory as a rural area. We have thousands of families living off of farming in our city. And we have our Secretary of Economic Development here with me, Aline Cardoso, and she takes care of our family farmers there in our city. So our engagement, the government engagement, is essential, but not only in the city agendas, but promoting articulated public policies with other stakeholders, as we are here doing at COP27, but in the state and the federal levels in our country, in Brazil too. So beyond integrating the private sector, the civil society, the NGOs, the academia, and sharing and complementing knowledges, experiences, and best practices. So we believe that union, integration, and disconnection and networking is crucial to achieve the global goals, the ESG agenda, the sustainability agendas, and the circular economy principles too. We have our rain gardens in São Paulo. We are 273 rain gardens already. Until the end of our government in 2024, it will be 400. So we are implementing nature-based solutions to minimize the impacts of climate change, as an example. Thank you. And sorry for my time. I think I passed the 2 minutes a little bit. Thank you, Catriona, again.
It's
a
okay,
pleasure
you said
for us.
interesting things. Thank you. Okay, I feel like we've got a fantastic panel here, so audience, please do feel free to think of some questions. I'll come out to you all in a couple of minutes. I think we've got fantastic international representation, but we've also got different representatives from different stages of the building and construction value chain. So let's lean into that in a second. But Karim, let me come back to you. You mentioned that you could tell us a little bit more, please, about Global ABC's 10 principles for adaptation. Could you share a little bit on that, please?
Yes, thank you. Of course, the 10 principles for effective action is an initiative. It's a collective initiative with the private sector, international funder, financial institution, private public financial institution also, NGO, academical institution, etc. The objective is to accelerate the implementation of adaptation with the easy action. And this is not a new framework because it exists in a lot of diagnosis, methodology, etc. The objective is how rapidly to integrate in your mindset some 10 principles for effective action to support or to achieve in the best way the adaptation action. And it's a common document, it's a common manifesto. We could the 10 principles now it could call the international manifesto. For example, it was the question of how you could have an access of the qualified data with the an open data, because if you want to estimate or to design the built environments aligned with the climate change, you need to have some data. Sometimes it could be expensive, but how we could shift for free from the expensive cost to the free access, for example. This is how to integrate also the nature-based solution. At the same time, how to find the financial institution or the financial way or the financial mechanism. For example, the question is if you consider the cost of the adaptation than a cost or than an investment. This is the question. The question of solidarity, for example, the question of the scale, because the building is not an island, it's something very connected with energy network, telecommunication network, the road, etc., etc. That's why I promote this 10 principles for effective action. It's very easy to download the document. You write in the Google 10 principles for effective action in the Global Alliance website, and you will see very, very easy to share the document. And we are today to make a call for action because we want to implement some feedback, some experience, international experience from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from America, from island country, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Karim, I really like what you said there about adaptation being more than just the buildings level. It's about the infrastructure and community that sits around it. Let's come back to that. And I think your plug for the Global ABC website is very good. We've got people joining us online from all around the world who are on the website already. So easy for them to do. Thank you. Helen, I wonder if there's anything you'd like to add to that, because Karim's given us a great international and theoretical perspective, but would love to get the African perspective. This is the African COP. Anything you'd like to add?
I think from my perspective, in addition to the principles I think that have been discussed, is to ensure that the element of collaboration as a principle really is highlighted, because the challenges we are facing in African cities really are complex, and I think that applies even in the cities in Latin America, everywhere else, global north, global south. So I think that challenge really, for me, I wanted to see collaboration being highlighted as one of the core principles that's required for us to build a resilient and adaptive built environment. Again, just looking at the perspective of the multiplicity of the stakeholders that we have in our city, but also just because we can't solve this when we are just one of us, because even as the mayor has said, even within an individual city, the heterogeneity of the climate risks in themselves. We'll find in a city that for those on the coast, they are facing coastal surges. The ones that are a bit more inland within the city are facing urban flooding. So it's so complex that we need everyone. But for me, the most important thing is to begin to have the communities at the front line who are the most vulnerable in the room. And when we are discussing resilience, to have them there because they are a source of solutions. They know their challenges best. We require data that is really granular, because those challenges, again, as I said, are really specific, and those communities are the ones who understand that the most. So I think having them in the room as we talk, for me, would be the strongest thing. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are going to have a whole panel on how we engage communities, how we bring in civic participation, hosted by Alejandra in about an hour's time. So we will hear more on that then. So Sunita and Anna, I actually have the same question for you both, because we've heard really beautifully from Helen and Karim what resilience means, what the principles are. But I think the natural next question for all of us is, how do we do it and who should be doing it? And so we have a representative from the world of policy and regulation, our cities level representative, and we have a representative from the private sector. So I'd love to get both of your perspectives. Specifically, Anna, what should cities be doing? How much can regulation and policy enhance resilience? And then Sunita, what should the private sector be doing? Anna, should we start with you?
Thank you. So our challenges have the same magnitude of our city. There are around 2 million people in São Paulo living in favelas. So our government main effort is to reduce inequalities and potentialize inclusion. The sustainable climate resilience and adaptation agendas integrates our whole program of goals, our city program of goals, which is a social pact with our public municipal administration. So we do have a housing plan which established interventions priorities, defining according to areas with geological risks, lack of infrastructure, poverty, and health indexes too. So in the areas currently in intervention, especially near the the natural water sources, we unite actions for urban improvement and protecting these areas where two important springs are located, which supplies about 4 million people in our metropolitan region. So we have been implementing basic sanitation infrastructure, the priority to universalize the service, and to eliminate risk areas and resettle that families in new units. So we are building 8,000 new units. They are under construction to attend 30,000 families in these areas near the water sources. And especially in these areas, we are implementing parks and other green solutions on the edges of the dams so they are not being reoccupied by these families. So these are some examples we would like to share with you, Catriona.
Thank you. Those are great examples and showing fantastic action happening at city scale. Sinita, what can and should the private sector be doing?
So it's the private sector that has the wherewithal to take up innovation and introduce to the stakeholders and the customers that what a better world looks like. So while citizens and government have a role to play, it's the private sector that will lead the way for implementation. We at Mahindra Life Spaces have a 100% green portfolio since 2014, and we have taken up a more stronger target of becoming carbon neutral by 2040, and all our buildings are going to be net zero by 2030. So that's quite a steep target, and we're leading the decarbonization in the real estate sector in India and trying to pull in more stakeholders of the value chain, so including the design, the contractors, the regulators and the suppliers and the innovators to sign up for the decarbonization charter, which we are leading along with three other companies, that is WRI, EcoCollab and AEEE. So these are some of the actions that corporates can lead for mobilizing decarbonization in the sector.
Thank you. Anything else they can do to make sure they're tackling resilience and adaptation as well?
Absolutely. So there are use of technology that can be used to help the customers understand what kind of homes that they are going to be living in, right from land acquisition to the design of buildings, how these homes can lead to better living and healthier living can be brought into the communication. So that needs to be brought out. Homes that are heat resilient are able to withstand flooding risks. Scarcity of water needs to be communicated very deeply. And as corporates build and they build responsibly, the entire value chain needs to cater to this requirement of a hotter and a wetter world. And these are some of the actions that companies can take for resilience.
Thank you so much. We have many more questions written on my iPad, but we've got a fantastic full room here. So if anybody would like to share a question live, we've got a couple here.
Hello, thank you for letting me ask some questions. I have just two questions. The first one is, well, I'm a young person, so how are young people actually engaging with resilience and buildings? And how can we move this conversation to the academic sector? Because students really need to understand this. I'm a highly graduated architect, so this is not taught in architecture generally. So I believe this is very important, and that's why I came here today. And the second question is, how can we, and it can be also related to academic, how can we take this new term from the AR6 report from the IPCC, which is maladaptation, and take it to building cities and all the infrastructure that we're doing? How can we assess this? I know that it's a new term, so I believe it has to be investigated, but maybe if one of you can guide or say how can we actually get that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, one initiative around engaging youth uh, is to have them involved in competitions for developing net zero resilient homes, and that can be done through, so there is an initiative called Solar Decathlon globally, and in India is SDI, and we partner with them to take interns so that they can help work with us on live projects for delivering resilient homes. So that's involving architects, engineers, and other stakeholders who are part of this huge competition to deliver net zero homes, net zero resilient homes, looking at all different aspects of climate change, adaptation, water, energy, waste, and so on. So that's one of the ways of doing it, and I think it can be scaled up even further, involving more colleges, more students, and because we need that pool of talent to be able to deliver resilient infrastructure, and we need to be able to do it fast. So
Thank you. I just want to lean into this levers of change piece, and then I'll come back to your question, if that's okay. Helen, we were thinking in the prep for this session that I could come to you to talk about the key levers we need to see to take action. We've heard about education, we've heard about policy, but again, you focus on African cities. What are the key levers that we need to see change?
I think one of the biggest key levers, I think I would say is, and someone mentioned it, I can't remember who, really is to begin to first mobilize political goodwill, because sometimes for benefits that are software kind of benefits, sometimes they don't translate, well with the political class. And I think that becomes a challenge for those of us who are involved in data generation and communicating with the political class to begin to translate these benefits into economics. I think beginning to clarify in economic terms what's the cost of inaction. What does this mean in dollars, in shillings, depending on where you come from? What does it mean in terms of what we can gain when we talk about circular economy? What kind of livelihoods would we create? How many enterprises would we create? What would this mean for economies? So when we go down, so I think for me, one of the key levers is just mobilizing political goodwill by really beginning to go down on jargon and beginning to speak the language that a lot of people understand, which is the economics and the humanization of what it means. But at the same time, I think a key lever, again, that was mentioned, is to address the element of equity. Because we know we have the formal city, but there's a big informal part of the city, right? So as long as we do not address that element, a trajectory that's low carbon resilient, but then doesn't address the most vulnerable, then really is not a solution in itself. So I think those are the two key levers from how I see it. Yeah.
Anyone else want to come in?
Rapidly, perhaps to complete and to answer your question, it's about the academical stakeholders. I think that adaptation could be considered as a new paradigm. Why a new paradigm? Because first of all, we know that the risk zero doesn't exist, and we need to live and we need to anticipate, to design the built environment with the risk. And the question after is, because we accept the risk, we want to share, we want to support the risk. I think that this is the key answer to open the possibility to accept some risk with the financial institution, because the question today is not a question of solution. We could find a lot of experience, a lot of solution. The question is, we want to pay, we want to finance. That's why I repeat one of my previous argument. It's about the cost. If we need to consider the climate change finance than the cost or than investments, I think it's an ethical question. Because if you consider again that it's in a cost, I think a lot of policymakers still the statu quo, but we need to shift a paradigm to accept, and that's why I think it's a new model, the new finance model, something like this. And just to complete concerning your proposition, I'm sure that because we are in a shift concerning this new paradigm, the university, the academical stakeholder scientists could become a big part of the solution, and with the capacity building, with the new training, new type of PhD, for example, the new, it could be in the international, universal topics which should be shared with the university. Social, science, engineer science, civil engineer, etc., etc.
Thank you so much. And our next session actually will be on how we mobilize finance. So we'll be handing over to Juliet and Morgan for that one. But
Transition.
we've got a couple more questions. Let me come to you.
Hi, I'm Ilya Azarov from the American Institute of Architects, and I had a question about, because it's about implementation, I love what's being said. How do you look at the feedback loop as you're doing implementation to ensure that it's truly resilient, and does that make the opportunity for new jobs and training to answer this question? Because that's what we've found is the serious gap is enforcement to make sure it's right and make sure it takes hold. The feedback loop is so important. I wanted to hear about that.
Yes, there is a serious gap. It requires a lot of retraining and bringing back those elements which are typically taken up in the first year of architecture, and teaching building physics and the impact of climate change from a physics lens to architects. And that's important because to understand the environment, the microclimate, and how it impacts the building will help architects design better. This serious gap, because I think most architectural students actually skim through some of these things. They do not design for nature. They do not design for using materials that are adaptive. And there are very few architects who take it up to design climate responsive homes. That is the key lever for adaptation, and that needs to be brought back in center of architecture.
Thank you, Sunita. Apologies for this noise. It's apparently next door, so hopefully they figure that out. Mayor Manuel, would you like to ask your question?
If I'm allowed. Thank you. I mean, I came to this panel with very high expectations, because I think that both in my country and in the African continent, I'm one of the mayors who is very vocal for climate change, for resilience, for adaptation, and so on. But incidentally, where I'm finding the biggest resistance is at my infrastructure department. My engineers, my architects, they do not translate what we are talking here into projects. We tell them we want resilient roads. For him, it's just a concept somewhere. When he's calculating, in his formula, resilience doesn't have a place. When I say I want a resilient school, it doesn't feature in the because the formula he learned 10, 20 years ago didn't include it. So I see this department as one of the obstacles. I need to learn how to deal with them. How do I retrain them? Again, I went to the university. I spoke with the dean of the faculty, and I checked their curriculum. These words are not yet in the curriculum. They are in the conference rooms, but if you check the subjects from first year to the last year, they are not there. So if we don't change the curriculum and the content, the kind of courses, I think that we will be talking, we will be like COP30, but in reality, things will not be moving. So I want to say, how can fast we tackle the education sector that she mentioned, the architecture school, the engineering, civil engineering, and so on, so that the new breed of those students who are coming out are equipped with instruments that will equate and will be able of materializing what we are discussing here. Thank you.
Great question.
Thank you. Mayor, we suffer the same in our country and in our cities. So I think bringing the universities, the public universities, and other stakeholders, international ones like C40 Cities, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, talking more about the SDGs, about ESG agendas, sensibilizing them about about one world, one planet. We don't have a plan B. So I think bringing the academia together with our city halls, with our governments is one of the forms to tackle this problem. We are doing this in our city. We have our São Paulo University, USP, is one of our public universities, working with our city hall and implementing technology to nature-based solutions and to re-qualify and constantly qualifying our workers, our public officers. So I would like to share our example. We have the São Paulo University with us, changing this reality and making technology to tackle these problems, to make our city more resilient.
Anyone else want to come in?
I think I would have thrown this to the Green Building Council, because I think when a problem appears to cut across, then it begins to need a larger, something bigger that can begin to translate change in the different cities, because it sounds it's a common problem that the curriculums are obsolete, do not acknowledge emerging concepts of resilience and adaptation. And I think for a form of peer-to-peer learning, I think for where this has been applied in other universities and things like that would be great, or some form of labs, some labs that are beginning to transfer this kind of information. And I think it would be a challenge, maybe more to someone who's bigger, that would be able to begin to catalyze that in different countries, I think.
Thank you. To answer your observation and your feedback, I think also that the technical solution could have a limit. We need to accept the limit of the technical solution, notably because, as I just told before during my first intervention, we are living in the uncertainty future. We can control all the events, what the global change, the climate predictive model, we have 15 models in the IPCC. We have a lot of scenarios. We speak about the RCP 8.5, etc., etc. We know that we need to deal, and sometimes when you design a building, when you design a road, an infrastructure, you need to make a statement, you need to choose one value. And after, perhaps during your design phase and after your construction, perhaps the reality of the climate change will be changed. And we need to deal with this reality. That's why big parts of the solution could be depend on the behavior, the users, and one non-relevant question or remark, it could, if it's necessary each time to rebuild. It's a question.
Thank you very much. I'll have to jump in there, but it's amazing to see a case study in development here. Feels like we have some intercity networking happening too. Panelists, we have 1 minute left. Can I ask you for your one sentence takeaway that you would like our audience to please remember?
1 minute each?
One sentence each. Even harder.
Sentence.
It can be a long sentence, but it's got to be quick. We can come back to you. That was quite hard.
I think the key is these exchanges of best practices, is to strengthen this multiple stakeholders integration and focus on prevention. I think prevention is the key to resilience, to make our cities' agendas more resilient according to the SDGs, the global goals agendas, and the circular economy principles, and putting our governments together with civil society, with NGOs, and with you, international stakeholders. I think this is it. We have to be all together to tackle resilience in cities.
Thank you.
For me, it will be an advocacy about the 10 principles for effective action. Please share in maximum the 10 principles for effective action, including all the stakeholders, municipalities, the local administration, private and public stakeholders, to align the adaptation action with the mitigation action.
From my side, it's climate responsive design is at the heart of everything that we design in the urban infrastructure.
I think mine will still be collaboration, saying that the challenges are immense, so we need to have radical collaborations with all the necessary allies across cities and across sectors. Thanks.
Thank you very much, this wonderful panel. Thanks to you all for your questions. Amira.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katrina. And thank you all. I would like to thank all our panelists. It was an amazing session, and I can see the energy that we feel right now. And we have the solutions. Let's say that we have the solutions. We just need to scale it up. And I think that one of my takeaways is that we need collaboration and inclusiveness. This might be our key, and we need to create the business case to unlock the finance. So I would really like to thank you so much, and I would like to welcome on stage Juliet and Morgan. And we also have Ahmed, who will be dialing in for our next panel on, it's a fireside chat, financing resilience and adaptation.
Are we good here? How to have a fireside chat with someone who's actually on a screen behind you. So I'm just going to wait and see if we have Ahmed joining us. Hopefully we do. Sure. So, still curious how I'm going to do the chat without getting a dreadful crick in my neck, but it's great to be here. I think reflecting on the previous session, we do have the solutions, the next part of the conversation. So hopefully what we'll be solving with Morgan and Ahmed in the next 25 minutes is where do we get the finance from and how do we unlock the finance? My name's Juliet Mian. I'm a director in ARUP. I lead our resilience and adaptation services in my region and a group, a skills network globally. In ARUP, we have the solutions, we deliver the solutions all across the built environment, working with people across the value chain. But reflecting on all of the conversations so far today, there's an awful lot to do. We're ready, but still we keep hearing over and over again this week the finance is not there, it's not flowing into adaptation in the same way. So, if we can solve that, that would be great, Ahmed. Morgan, no problem. Hello, Ahmed, it's great to see you. I don't know if you can see Morgan and I, but I was going to start by asking you to introduce yourself, explain who you are and what you're doing in the space of the finance. To move a bit.
Hello everyone, my name is Omid Saberi. I hope you can hear me. If you can just indicate that you can hear me.
We can hear you. Might be good if the volume can go up very slightly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us, Ahmed? Doesn't look like it. Can you hear us? You got it?
Sure. The issue, I think there is a bit of issue on the Zoom. I can hear the room very vaguely, but I will try to switch my audio so that I can hear the room as well. So my name is Omid Saberi. I'm part of the Climate Business Department of the World Bank, IFC, IFC within the World Bank. What we do encourage financing climate action around the world. I work with the building sector, so I work on climate mitigation and climate resilience in buildings. I've been working with the World Green Building Council on the programs for improving investment in green buildings for last 9 years. And last 3 years, we have started a program to invest also on resilience. And with the with the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, we have been working on the adaptation working group to improve not only developing the knowledge, but also how to finance resilience. I'm happy to describe this a bit more in detail.
Great, thank you, Ahmed. We look forward to hearing more. So Morgan, over to you. Introduce yourself and what you're doing in the space.
Sure, thanks. I'm Morgan Richmond. I'm a senior analyst at Climate Policy Initiative, or CPI. We're a research organization, and the two pieces of our work that I'll flag that I think are relevant to this discussion are CPI is the secretariat of the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance, or the Lab. It's a public-private partnership of 60-plus members, governments, DFIs, commercial financial institutions, sort of across the spectrum. And what we do is we incubate climate finance ideas, not just in the building space, but including in built environment, cities, adaptation, so lots of relevance to this conversation. And I'm happy to talk more about some of the ideas that we've incubated on the annual cycle on which the lab operates. We're now entering our 9th cycle. Two that I'll flag that I'm happy to talk about more are, one is called CILRIF, Climate Insurance Linked Resilient Infrastructure Financing, which is why we call it CILRIF. It was proposed to the lab by UN Capital Development Fund. We've been working with them on it for about a year now, and the idea, sort of as it sounds, is to link municipal insurance with resilient infrastructure financing, with the aim to reduce the premium on the insurance through the investment in resilient infrastructure, and to reduce the pricing on the resilient infrastructure through the access to municipal insurance. So that's CILRIF, several others, and then I'll just flag also very briefly that CPI is also the secretariat of the Cities Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, or CCFLA. I think we actually have members in the room, and it also is a public-private partnership, a coalition of leaders seeking to invest in urban adaptation. So that's to flag a couple of our efforts, and happy to talk more about them.
Thank you, thanks Morgan. So it's great to have both of you here with your expertise and different perspectives on finance. I think I'm hoping to get some reassurance from you both. I'm hoping to hear that the business case for adaptation in the built environment is clear, that the finance is ready. Another thing that I'm hoping to hear is that as a group, we're not decoupling the decarbonisation of the building sector from the resilience of the building sector. One of the things that we heard in the earlier panel is context specific. There's very different needs in different cities, in different sectors, in different geographies. So I'm hoping for both of you, when you're talking through this, try and give us a little bit of what geography or what sector you're talking about to make it that level more tangible. I suppose the big question, the kind of, if we can get this right, we've nailed it, is where should the finance be coming from? And the second part to that is, why isn't it coming yet? Because we're definitely hearing that through this week, it isn't coming. So maybe Morgan, just to get your perspectives on that.
Yeah, I mean, the basic answer is that it should be coming from everywhere, right? That finance needs to be scaling for adaptation from all financial institutions, all providers of finance and funding. The two things that I'll capture are, one, within CCFLA, the Cities Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, we just released a financial instruments toolkit. So a toolkit of 72 financial instruments that I think start to answer that question. Obviously, a toolkit only is as good as the use of it. But the idea is to be able to use PPAs, power purchase agreements, when those are the best use, to use pooled finance when that's the best use case, payments for ecosystems, so sort of spanning the various financial instruments. And the toolkit thinks through who are the right actors to be engaged in each of these initiatives, what is the role of DFIs and in which financial instruments, what's the role of governments and in which. But I think the answer in some ways is all, but the goal of the toolkit is to think about what's the where and when, and in what context. So I'll leave it there. Happy to
maybe Morgan, if you could expand
Yeah.
a bit more maybe on one of those things in the toolkit. What does that mean in a specific context, or examples of it working successfully where it has unlock something?
Yeah, I'll offer one not from the toolkit, but from the lab that I know has been implementing, and it's cooling as a service, which came through the Global Innovation Lab in 2019. It was proposed by the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, and it's a servitization mechanism for clean cooling. Sort of a perfect example in some ways of both aims of decarbonization as well as adaptation, so adapting to extreme heat conditions in a variety of contexts. The idea is to be able to apply the cooling in commercial settings, in cold chains, etc. And what makes the context important is that cooling as a service right now is implementing in Nigeria, in India, and in a couple of other markets. And you're right, the context is really important. It's critical for the context of cooling as a service that there be energy efficiency policies in place that allow it to operate, that make it possible for cooling providers to function. And then it also is really critical that there are commercial banks, that there's sort of commercial finance that is available for the recapitalization. The idea with the servitization approach is that a cooling provider would provide the cooling up front to a customer. It's very expensive, and so the servitization would be that the customer instead pays per unit over time versus upfront, where they maybe are not able to stomach or use, buy the upfront expensive cooling. And so in that context, it's really important that the cooling provider can access recapitalization so that they're not out the money that they put into the product. So in that context, energy efficiency policy and commercial finance availability, but obviously it varies instrument by instrument.
Great, and I do think that's a good example of quite how specific you need to be before you can start to unlock the finance. So for Omid, I think a similar question about where, from the work you've been doing, you said you've been looking at resilience and adaptation for the past 3 years, examples of how some of those blockers or barriers to finance have been overcome with the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Juliet and Morgan. I think the key, if we go back maybe 10 years ago and look at the role of financial institutions in developing the building on the mitigation side, you can see that the banks had really little role to play. And, if we don't engage the financial institutions and the banks, the chances of us scaling up investment or scaling up any project on climate mitigation gets limited. The reason I'm bringing this up because when the World Bank and IFC, we started doing investments on green buildings, for example, within 7 to 8 years, we have seen that now green bonds around the world has increased to billions of dollars. We also see that there is a lot of interest from commercial banks and local banks to invest in different instruments, such as green mortgages or green construction finance, that scales up investments on climate. We also need to do the same for resilience, and the resilience has been lagging behind. What we have been doing within our own business is to what we call have all our investments to be screened for Paris alignment, and the screening for Paris alignment has two components. One is screening for climate mitigation, and the second one is climate adaptation. So by July 2023, 85% of all our investments within the IFC would be screened for climate mitigation and adaptation. We have also developed programs for called Building Resilience Index to be able to measure resilience of different assets and also then drive banks and international money to be invested in more resilience assets. That's in a nutshell. What we need to do is to have the international finance and donors to be able to support resilience. Then we need to work at the national level with the national banks and cities. We heard from Sao Paulo to put incentives for more resilience assets so that the developers and private sector move towards more resilience assets. Then we need to have commercial banks to provide bring resilience construction finance as well as resilience mortgages so that the end users as well as construction sector move toward resilience assets. Happy to explain more. I have a bit of problem hearing the room, and that's unfortunately. I hope that the room can create something to that on the Zoom we can hear the room better.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry that it's proving difficult. But thank you for that. That was a great explanation. And I think I mean this question is maybe broader than only the finance question, but it's highly relevant when we're talking about what's needed to access the finances. This question of balancing the needs of mitigation and resilience. And Omid, you just told the story of resilience and adaptation is lagging. What you were saying 10 years ago is coming in more recently. Do you see tension between the finance that's coming through for mitigation or the finance that might come for resilience, or are the two things balanced and being delivered together? Did you catch that, Omid? Not really. I'll direct the question to Morgan initially. Sorry, Morgan.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, so I think there is both tension and the potential for complementarity. Another project that CPI executes is the global landscape of climate finance. It tracks global climate finance flows. You're right, adaptation finance is much slower and smaller, although it's accelerating faster than mitigation finance. But in 2019, 2020, less than 10% of the climate finance that we tracked was adaptation finance, something on the order of just less than 50 billion compared to 600 billion total. So adaptation finance certainly is needed. I think the promise of the commitment of the MDBs to increase their climate finance flows to 50% adaptation as soon as possible is great. I think that's a good step. I think another thing that I would flag is on the complementarity piece, the potential to build in systemic resilience into mitigation finance. That when you're investing in a hydropower plant, you should be thinking about the physical scenarios for drought in the coming decades. If you're investing in solar and wind, you should be thinking about whatever the various conditions are of the place, increased flooding, storm surge. So I think that's a way to build in, to make it both at the same time. And then finally, I think there's the potential of dual benefits finance. In some ways, that systemic resilience finance and mitigation sort of fits the bill, but I think there's also the promise of something like cooling as a service, or of cooling in general, if it's efficient cooling, is to meet the demands both of reducing emissions and responding in that case to extreme heat. Ditto with nature-based solutions that can sequester carbon and also protect against flood or heat risk. So I think there's potential for both, but you're not wrong that there's some tension there, and it's sort of a matter of being careful.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for us is to lean into the complementarity rather than the tension. And I think maybe I'm being a little bit naive, but I think that makes the business case twice as strong when we have got those solutions that actually deliver both together. So the more of those rather than continuing with the two sort of buckets of money. We have time for questions. If anyone in the room wants to raise a question to Morgan, Omid, if he can hear us, which unfortunately is difficult, but he's nodding. That's good. So while we're waiting, maybe Omid, if you can hear me at the moment, that same question about the tension between I'm looking here. I know you're here. Sorry. The tension between finance for mitigation, finance for resilience, and whether you've seen in your IFC work ways of sort of leaning into that complementarity. Did you get that?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe what I can give you a very quick example of the work that has been done on the resilience finance and mitigation finance on a couple of countries, right? For example, we have done some work in the Philippines. Philippines is one of the hotspots for different type of disasters. We have done a lot of work there with movement to zero carbon assets and reducing their carbon footprint. And now we are seeing that the same developers and builders that they have been looking at climate mitigation, they have interest in climate resilience as well. And combining these two makes our storyline much stronger, because obviously there is extra cost to become zero carbon, and there is extra cost to become climate resilience. However, what we want to do is to bring incentives as well as what we call international donors. For example, UK government has been working with us on climate mitigation side, and the Australian government has been working with us on climate resilience side. We like to bring these financial solutions towards incentivizing to combine climate mitigation and adaptation. We have been working with Arise Network. Arise Network is a global network that works on resilience and also private sector. We are working with the governments, and combining these two is the way forward to me. I mean, the only way for us to be able to combat the climate change is to bring two sides of the game together. But at this point of time, banks and financial institutions, they really need more hand-holding. We have to all support financial institutions to be able to understand the business case here. But also we need to bring international finance to the game in different countries. As I said, we started in the Philippines. We are working also in Dominican Republic. In the Philippines, we are working with the Bank of Philippine Islands. In the Dominican Republic, we are working with BHD, is a local bank. And the idea is to screen the assets for resilience and then find solutions so that we can provide financial solutions through the banks to end developers. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that what we are talking about will be implemented on the ground, despite all the limitations of skill gap and others. But the only having this solution in place, number one, and then as other panelists we were hearing earlier in this session, how we are going to train the students, how we are going to train engineers and what we call verifiers that are going to verify these buildings and make improvements such as retrofitting existing buildings, or for new building, how are going to design the new construction or new infrastructure more resilient.
Great, thank you very much, Ahmed. And I think there's been a couple of good case studies, actually, so maybe a call to Green Building Council to pull some of those together. So the case study of the Philippines, the case study of I'm really excited about those case studies of doing both the mitigation and the resilience and showing that stronger business case. So I think just to maybe wrap up with reflections from you, Morgan, we're talking about implementation, how to put this into action. What would you like to see happen in the next year? What's the sort of one change you'd look for to see those accelerating costs really continue to grow and increase?
Yeah, okay, I'll offer two very brief thoughts. One that I haven't mentioned yet is I think a massive increase in grant finance and other concessional finance for physical climate risk assessments is super critical. It will underlie all of the resilience efforts that are done, and I know that a big barrier is the lack of physical climate risk assessment and the lack of ability to implement those in a real way. So that's one. And then number two is making sure that the national adaptation plans and NDCs that are being developed are as investment ready as possible, and ensuring then that the government procurement practices that flow from those are also informed by climate risk in a robust and serious way.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'd agree very strongly with both of those. So thank you very much. And sorry, Ahmed, that it was difficult for you to hear the room at times, but thank you so much for your contribution. And I think we'll round up that part on, I think we solved finance, right? That one's done.
Thank you very much, Juliet, Morgan, and Ahmed. Thank you very much. Yes, the brief was to solve all of the climate finance crisis in 25 minutes, and I think you guys gave it a very good shot. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we're going to go to break in 5 minutes, but before that, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Flavia Howard, who's going to give us some pre-break remarks for us to think about over the next few minutes. Flavia is the mainstreaming climate resilience lead of the UN High-Level Climate Champions, and she's going to talk to us a bit about the work that she's doing. Flavia, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
and thank you all for listening. I was supposed to be giving the resilience remarks at the start, so I will take it as given that you all know what resilience is, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been doing with the Champions Race to Resilience, but importantly, the adaptation agenda, which is formally been launched this week as the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda. It's been launched not only by the Climate Champions, but also by the COP27 presidency and by the UNFCCC. And I think it's a really testament to what we're trying to do with that agenda, that it's been these three groups coming together as an example of sort of radical collaboration. What the adaptation agenda is intending to do is demonstrate what we need to build a resilient world by 2030. And that is the first time, I think, the solutions, the ideas in it are not new, but it's the first time that we're bringing all of this together under one umbrella. So the adaptation agenda contains 30 solutions, 30 adaptation outcomes for a resilient world, looking across systems of food and agriculture, finance, cross-cutting enablers of finance and planning, but also human settlements, nature and water, and infrastructure, and of course, human settlements. I think it's really critical that buildings and the built environment stretch across all of these systems. It's not just looking at one or two. There